Welcome back to This is Baseball. My name is Brandon Johnson. Thank you for listening today. On this episode of This is Baseball, we are going to look at the 2006 St. Louis Cardinals. Now, the '06 Cardinals are one of my all-time favorite teams. I think them being a little bit of an underdog in this season, in the postseason, and then looking at the roster that they had, this team is really fun for me. This is also around the time that I feel like I really got into baseball, was when this team went on the run that they did. So I'm excited to take a look back at what the 2006 Cardinals did. So let's just take a look at what happened this season. So 2006 Cardinals were led by Tony La Russa, obviously legendary manager, both with the A's and the Cardinals. Spent some time away, came back with the Chicago White Sox, and that wasn't so great. But I remember him fondly as the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals. Walt Jocketty was the general manager of this Cardinals team. And something of note, if you follow the Astros cheating scandal, the GM of the Astros, Jeff Luhnow, was the scouting director for the St. Louis Cardinals at the time. So he came from the Cardinals before he was with the Houston Astros and did the nonsense that they did with the trash cans. So let's get to the roster a little bit. In 2006, the St. Louis Cardinals had 4 All-Stars, 3 position players, and 1 pitcher. Obviously, Albert Pujols is on this team. Albert Pujols led the league in WAR, and at 8.5 wins above replacement, he led the league in slugging and OPS, 671 slugging and a 1.102 OPS. He hit 49 home runs that year. He had 137 RBIs, 33 doubles, hit .331. He was second place in MVP because Phillies first baseman Ryan Howard had a better season. Ryan Howard hit .313 with a 425 on base. He had 58 home runs, so he was 9 home runs better than Albert Pujols was that year, and he had 149 RBIs. And his MVP season followed up the rookie of the year season that he had the year before. Great season by Albert Pujols that was deemed the second best as far as the MVP votes are concerned, but I'm sure that Albert Pujols would rather have a World Series championship over an MVP vote. Anyway, Pujols had won the first of his 3 MVPs the year prior anyway. He was a 3-time MVP, 2005, 2008, 2009. And I've said it many times on this show, I think that Albert Pujols is the greatest hitter in the last 25 years. Put him against Miguel Cabrera, and you have a pretty good argument there. So, second All-Star on this list was David Eckstein. David Eckstein, the shortstop for the Cardinals that season at .292, 350 on base percentage, 18 doubles. David Eckstein was also the World Series MVP for the 2006 Cardinals, the third All-Star as far as position player goes, and second best player on this Cardinals roster. Hall of Famer Scott Rowland, the third baseman for the team, .296 that year with 369 on base percentage. And Scott Rowland obviously is Hall of Famer, well-deserved Hall of Famer. Albert Pujols is not eligible for the Hall of Fame yet, but we know that he will be a lock for the Hall of Fame. Looking at Pujols' career stats, 3,300 hits, 703 home runs, .296 career batting average, 2,200 RBIs, career WAR of 101.2, 3-time MVP, 11-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year, 2-time World Series champion, batting title, 6 Silver Sluggers, 2 Gold Gloves, an NLCS MVP, won the Clemente Award. Got a good resume. The fourth All-Star on this team is one of my favorite pitchers of his era. It was Chris Carpenter. Chris Carpenter went 15-8, 3.09 ERA, 220 innings pitched. And you had Jason Marquis, who led the league in losses. He went 14-16. Mark Mulder's on this team. Jeff Weaver. And I think everybody remembers the bullpen. You had Jason Isringhausen, who was their closer. He had 33 saves in 58 innings, but he ended up getting hurt before the postseason. So Adam Wainwright, who we've already seen his entire career from beginning to end at this point. This was his first full season with the St. Louis Cardinals, and he got to take over as the closer for the playoffs and has some of the greatest moments in baseball history as the closer. So just expanding on this roster, obviously Yadier Molina, who's retired now as well. He's gone down as one of the best catchers of his generation, though didn't have a great season in 2006. But still just some great names on this roster with Jim Edmonds, Juan Encarnacion, whose career ended up getting cut short because he was in the on-deck circle and got hit in the eye with a foul ball in 2007. That was the end of his career. Now, the Cardinals were World Series champions in 2006, but the season was a little bit rough. It had its ups and downs. They started 31-16, but they had a lot of injuries. I mentioned Mark Mulder earlier. He missed some time. Jim Edmonds, David Eckstein, who, like I said, was World Series MVP, missed time. And then Jason Isringhausen, who had blown a ton of saves before getting put on the IL. And then, again, you had players with poor performances like Jason Marquis and Yadier Molina. This team had losing records in June, August, and September. They finished with a record of 83-78. That was the worst for the Cardinals since 1999, where they went 75-86. Now, I've said it a lot. If you just go and look at the St. Louis Cardinals record over the years, especially over the last 25 years, they are just consistently good. They make the playoffs, and they get at least to the NLCS. Just a very well-run organization that has had a lot of success over the years. But let's look at the standings. I mentioned the Cardinals won their division. They went 83-78. This was back when there were 16 NL teams and 14 AL teams. The National League Central was a 6-team division, so it went Cardinals 1, Astros 2. They finished a game behind the St. Louis Cardinals. Cardinals had the worst win percentage for a team to make the playoffs in baseball history. They had, obviously, with that being said, they were the least threatening team heading into the postseason. In fact, the favorite in 2006 was from the National League was the New York Mets. The New York Mets were the only team in the National League to win at least 90 games. They finished with a 97-65 record. The Mets had Willie Randolph as their manager. So they had players like Carlos Delgado, Jose Reyes, David Wright, Carlos Beltran, who has the infamous strikeout in the NLCS, Indy Chavez, and then Tom Glavine, Pedro Martinez is on this team. An incredibly solid New York Mets team that had every right to be the favorite that year. So let's look at the Cardinals postseason. The Cardinals, like I said, won the NL Central, and they played the NL West champion San Diego Padres in the division round, and they beat them 3-1. And they would go on to play the favorites New York Mets in the NLCS. This series went 7 games. The Cardinals won 4-3 over the Mets. And this one was fun because if you remember, like I said, Adam Wainwright got his chance to be the closer for the postseason due to Jason Isringhausen's injury, and he made the most of it. So let's look at the bottom of the ninth in Game 7 of this NLCS. So Adam Wainwright's on the mound to close out the series, and to lead off was Jose Valentin, who hit a leadoff single to center field. Then in stepped Indy Chavez. He ends up with a base hit to left field, and now you have runners on first and second with nobody out. And in steps Cliff Floyd. And I need to mention that it is absolutely pouring during this game. Adam Wainwright ends up striking out Cliff Floyd with a great curveball to get the first out, which then brings in Jose Reyes. Reyes ends up lining out to center field for the second out, and now the Mets are down to their last out. Paul LaDuca comes in now for the Mets as Carlos Beltran is in the on-deck circle. So LaDuca walks, brings in Carlos Beltran, and if you're the Mets, you are in kind of a dream situation. You're at home, Game 7, you're down 2, there's 2 outs, bottom of the 9th, bases loaded. Here we go. You come through, and you're going to go down in baseball history. Adam Wainwright had something else in mind. Adam Wainwright struck out Carlos Beltran on 3 pitches. Not only did he strike him out, but he struck him out looking. He locked him up with a curveball to send the St. Louis Cardinals on to the World Series to play the Detroit Tigers, where the Cardinals would beat the Tigers 4-1. This would give the Cardinals their first World Series championship since 1982 and cap off the kind of underdog season that they had. They played the Tigers, who were a wild card team. They were a 95-win wild card team at that, but heavily favored over the Cardinals in that season as every team was against them. So, like I said, this is one of my favorite teams, and I always enjoy coming to look back at the roster and just an overview of the season, and then Adam Wainwright striking out Carlos Beltran looking is one of my favorite baseball moments in history, so I always enjoy coming back and looking at that, especially since we know that Carlos Beltran has an easier time hitting baseballs when a trash can is involved. Obviously, they didn't have that method in 2006. Maybe if they did, they would have won that game. But moving on, I can't believe it's been almost 20 years since that season. That's going to do it for today's episode of This Is Baseball. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.